This is Qudsiya, and welcome to episode 4 of Down to the Struts. Today, we'll learn about how a sport designed exclusively for blind and visually impaired people can change the way we think about designing the places and spaces around us. We'll listen in on my conversation with Karla Gilbride and Justin Chan, co-founders of the Metro Washington Association of Blind Athletes, affectionately known as MWABA. I am honored and privileged to sit on the board of this fantastic organization. I hope you enjoy this journey into the world of adaptive sports and their power to transform lives. Okay, let's get down to it. Great. So thank you, Karla and Justin, for joining me on Down to the Struts to talk about one of my favorite topics. I personally am a horrible goalball player, as Karla is has witnessed. But
not true. I disagree.
But I love the concept of the sport, and I'm excited that you guys are here to share all your wisdom about it. So first, can we start off with having each of you introduce yourselves and talk about how you got into sports and how you got into goalball in particular?
Sure, I can start. So I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I did a fair amount of sports and recreational things when I was in high school. My parents got me into a horseback riding program as a little kid and took me skiing when we went out to Colorado to visit relatives there, which I absolutely fell in love with. And then in high school, I was on the track and cross country teams. But all of those things are fairly like individual sports. You know, you're sort of competing against yourself and trying to improve your time. And there's camaraderie with other people. And I definitely enjoyed that, you know, being part of the team and going on runs with my classmates. But I didn't have the experience of doing a team sport, certainly not a team sport with other blind people, until after graduating from law school in DC. I moved out west and I lived in Berkeley for a while. And there's a group out there called BORP, which stands for Bay Area Outreach and Recreation Program. And they have a bunch of adaptive sports, including adaptive cycling and wheelchair basketball. And one of the sports that they have is goalball. So that was where I experienced goalball for the first time. So I was in my mid-20s. And, you know, there was kind of a recreational team. They met once a week and played a couple games and then went out for pizza and beer afterwards. And that's where I really fell in love with the sport.
Thanks, Karla. And you were the first person to introduce me to the concept of adaptive sports. I remember very vividly having drinks with you kind of shortly, like about a year into when I moved to DC, and you were trying to recruit me to your tandem cycling group, which is probably an episode for another day. But I had never thought about the concept of doing a sport in an adaptive way until I met you. So I was really excited to be introduced to all those activities through getting to know you. Justin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into sports and goalball?
I grew up in Florida and went to the school for the deaf and the blind. And that's kind of how I was introduced to sports. Goalball, track and field, some judo took place there. But that's really where I got my start in sports. I mean, I've always been a competitive person, whether it's like school or sports or just anything really. If you say I can't do something or you can do something better than me, I'm going to try to prove you wrong. So that's, I mean, it's kind of naturally fell into my lap. But I also attended a lot of sports camps. They have camps like they call camp abilities, and they also do different sports there, like goalball and cycling, swimming, for example, which I'm terrible at. But at some point, someone said, "Hey, did you ever consider joining the Paralympics for swimming?" And I said, absolutely not. But yeah, so that's pretty much how I got my start in sports. I kind of grew up with it.
That's so cool. Campability, the name alone is awesome.
Yeah.
I wish I had heard of that when I was growing up, and I totally identify with the competitive spirit. So Karla, can you tell us a little bit about how and where goalball got started? You've shared a little bit of that history with me in the past, and I just think it's such a fascinating story.
Goalball is unique. As far as I am aware, it's the only sport that was designed from the beginning as a sport to be played by people with disabilities. It's not an adaptation of an existing sport. Like, let's take the game of hockey and modify it to be played by people in wheelchairs or people who are blind, or, same thing with basketball. It's a brand new sport that was invented by blind people, and specifically by veterans in Germany and Austria after World War II. So the game was invented in 1946, and it was part of the rehabilitation of the soldiers who had just recently lost their vision and were trying to learn how to move around in the world as newly blind people. So one of the things they were trying to do was, develop their ear-hand coordination and like learn how to hear things in motion and kind of track things by sound. So that's one of the elements of the game, as Justin will talk about, is that being able to use your hearing and locating the ball as it's moving based on sound is really important. So that is how goalball kind of got its start. And then over the next couple of decades, it was played, more and more competitively by more and more people. And Justin mentioned earlier the Paralympic Games, which is the equivalent of the Olympics for people with physical disabilities. So goalball was first played as a demonstration sport in the 1972 Summer Paralympic Games. And then it became an official medal sport, where people can compete for medals for men in 1976 in the Toronto Games, and became a women's Paralympic sport in 1982, I believe, and has been played in the Paralympics ever since. There's now 81 nations who have competitive goalball teams as of 2017, according to an article that I just read. So it's played all over the world at the elite level, as well as, in these sort of more recreational leagues, that local communities have going.
That's really, really interesting. And I think it's interesting how it was both designed as a way for people who are sort of newly blind to continue or to participate in a sporting event, but also had this like sort of rehabilitative purpose. So do veterans still play goalball? Is it still used for that sort of therapeutic purpose today?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have played the game with veterans, and I know that the VA here in the US has an active program where they're working with the US Association of Blind Athletes to introduce veterans of all ages, both people who recently lost their vision, older veterans, to the game of goalball. And the last several national championships here in the US have included a team that's made up entirely of veterans. So it's definitely still, I can't talk about other countries as much because I'm not familiar, but here in the US there's definitely an emphasis on introducing the sport to veterans.
That's so interesting. And that's really cool that it continues to serve that purpose in addition to being now a kind of competitive sport. So, Justin, the million-dollar question, how is the game actually played? Can you tell us a little bit about what a goalball game is like?
As Karla said, the sport was designed specifically for the blind, and it leverages their hearing and communication skills with each other. So the sport is played between two teams comprised of up to 6 people. 3 people are on the court at one time, 2 people on wing positions, which are the side positions, and then 1 person in the middle, which is the center position. The court is laid out with tactile lines with wires or string taped on the ground. And depending on the different lengths and directions of the lines, they use it for spatial awareness and also just for positioning. And so the ball is also played with a ball with bells inside so that the players can hear it. And all the players are blindfolded. So the players can hear the ball, and what they do is they roll it to each other, almost kind of like a bowling style motion. And some people do fancy things like spin and what have you. And the ball can move pretty fast. In recent days, players have even started developing a kind of a bounce throw so that the ball is actually hitting you at weird angles and on the top of your body and things like that. So to defend the ball, the players kind of lay on their side to create a wall. So imagine like the game of Pong, where there's a little slider at the bottom trying to prevent the ball from hitting their goal. That's essentially what the players are, except 3 little paddles instead of just 1. Additional rules, basically, the ball has to hit on certain spots of the court so that the bell rings and it's not just flying through the air. And the opposing team has a fair shot at hearing it.
You can pass to your teammates.
Yeah, you can pass to your teammates. It evolves every year as the game kind of grows and players develop different skills. So
it's also a fast-paced game, which people don't necessarily realize. So there's a shot clock. When you have possession of the ball, you only have 10 seconds for it to get rid of it and to reach the midpoint of the court. So any passing that you're going to do, any moving around to set up your shot, all has to be done within that 10-second clock.
Are there any other rules, like for the audience, for example? Because how does everyone, in all the noise, like how do you track and hear the ball if you're relying on the bell?
Right. So the referees actually, before the ball goes into play, every time before they blow the whistle, they ask the audience to quiet, please, and then they blow the whistle and the ball goes into play. So they remind the audience consistently to keep the noise down, preferably complete silence.
I imagine if I was watching the two of you on a play goalball, I would want to be cheering the whole time. So that seems hard to contain yourself when you're excited about like someone winning.
The most difficult time to comply with that rule is when the ball crosses the goal line. And again, as Justin was saying, all of the important lines on the court are marked down with tape. Mm-hmm. And so as a blind spectator, if you're listening to the game, you can sometimes hear the ball cross that tape and hit the back of the net. Maybe it's right on the line. So until the referee blows the whistle and indicates goal, you're supposed to keep quiet and not start cheering. But that's very hard, especially if it's an exciting game and, that's like the game-winning point that gets scored. It's kind of amazing to see people like jumping up and down silently trying not to yell, until they're allowed to make noise.
Or sometimes it hits the goal. Sometimes the ball would hit the goal but not go in, or it would hit the top bar and go over. And people are cheering, because they thought it scored. So yeah, that's definitely hard.
I can imagine. I'm a very rowdy spectator. See, Justin, you talked about, the lying on your side and blocking the ball. I remember when I played during Blind Sports Day, the one time I played at the rec center with you all, it's sort of terrifying in a way because the ball is, as Justin described it, I guess it's bigger than a basketball and it's kind of heavy and it's coming at you. So what is that experience and what skills do you need to have to kind of effectively block the ball?
I would say that it definitely takes time to get used to tracking the ball with just your ears and positioning your body the right way. For example, if you're leaning backwards, you're basically just a ramp and the ball is just going to go over. And if you're leaning too far forwards, it's kind of just like just a speed bump. So there's like a happy medium of, you have to lay down almost kind of like leaning in, but not completely. It takes time to get used to body positioning, but definitely tracking the ball with your ears is something that a lot of people need time to get used to as well. But the key thing is really communication with your teammates, because you can do a lot. You can cut off a lot of angles, and you can tell somebody like that they need to cover a certain amount of space just by communicating to your teammates. So I would say that communication is key in that respect.
A lot of geometry and physics to the game of goalball, because the width of the court that you're defending, it's 30 feet across. So unless you have 3 10-foot tall people, there's going to be a little bit of a gap between the 3 players. But you can position yourselves, as Justin was saying, in such a way that the person on the other side either has to make the perfect shot right down the line to get in between where the people's bodies are positioned, or it's just going to be very difficult for them to get the right angle to get it in the goal. When I first started playing, like more than 10 years ago now, I guess, or around 10 years ago now, it was fairly unsophisticated. We would just kind of all lay down on our sides. So usually the person in the center is a little bit in front of the people on the wings so that it makes almost a triangle and you're less likely to collide with each other. And as I started playing more and playing with different people, I learned a lot more of these sophisticated angles of how people can position their bodies to be more effective with the defense.
Well, I imagine you need a lot of sort of isometric strength, right? Because you're holding yourself up in these sort of positions. You must be sore afterwards.
It's a lot of core strength, especially you were talking about the ball comes at you hard, which is true. And especially like as these bounce shots have gotten more common, it can take these tricky hops over you. That means to defend it more, have a better chance of defending it, you want to hit it in between its bounces so that you're getting it before it hops over you. So that's also ear training and kind of training, your sense of timing. And then, being able to move it kind of explosively when the moment is right. So it's a workout. It's a full body workout. And you're crouching and then you're popping back up to throw and you're getting back down on the ground and you're popping back up. So, you're
like
definitely
doing
sore
squats
the next day.
for an hour.
Oh my God. That sounds rough. You guys are tough. I wanted to go back to something you were saying earlier, Justin, because I think it's really interesting. So you mentioned the communication piece that a lot of the game, so Karla mentioned the strength and sort of the agility, and then it's also about communicating with your teammates. So how does that happen? Does the team do a lot of planning ahead of time in terms of how does communication happen both before and during a game and like during practice?
Well, so some of it happens before the game. For example, like you come up with a game plan. You say, "Hey, if I tell you to do this, this is what I want. Like I want you to move to the left or something." And then also just in the game, for example, if you're passing to your teammates, you just call their name and they respond. That way, you know where to pass the ball. But then also a lot of communication is telling your players where the ball is or what you're observing on the other end. So, for example, a lot of players will move around on the court. So they'll start from the left side, move to the right side, and throw it over there. And if one player hears it, they usually tell their other teammates so that everybody can read the ball better and better position themselves to make a defending play. And then, with that respect, that player who was moving from left to right is also probably communicating with his players so that he's not running over them. So there's a lot of communication on both sides of the ball, really.
And sometimes it's talking. It's it's on the right, it's on the left, but sometimes it's tapping. Justin mentioned avoiding collisions. If someone is moving across the court, their center player, who's the person they're most likely to collide with, will like make some noise, tap the ground. So it's like, oh, that's where that person is. Okay, I know I can avoid them. So sometimes it's very subtle things like that. The other thing that is important is if on the defensive side of the ball, if it's loose, letting people know where the ball is, because you have that 10 seconds to get control of it and throw it. So people are often saying, it's loose or it's forward, and then also counting down the 10 seconds. Usually there's one person who's responsible for kind of having a clock in their head. And then they'll say, you have 6 seconds left, you have 5 seconds left, get rid of it. And those are the sorts of in-game communications that people will do.
That's really cool. And I'm sure after a while you would all develop kind of a language with each other, especially if it's a team you're playing with it regularly. And so much of what you're just describing about the goalball court and the game, being inside of the game itself, it feels to me as a blind person being in this world for a little while, for an hour or so, that's totally designed for your use and has been created for you to participate. So Karla, I'm curious if you could share a little bit about things about the goalball court that you wish there was more of in the world, that things about the way the goalball court is designed that actually could make life easier outside of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things is the tactile lines that we were talking about. You can definitely feel those with your hands when you're on the ground and you're, crouching down to defend your position, but you can also feel them with your feet. And so a lot of times people, if they're standing up to throw to see kind of where they are in space, they will just scuff their toe or their foot along the ground, and you can pick up that tactile marker of the string that's taped down. And I would love for there to be more of those kind of just subtle bumps, but bumped up tactile lines. There are some. I mean, definitely the truncated domes on the edges of subway platforms is one example of a tactile feature that you could feel with your foot or with your cane to indicate, oh, this is the edge of the platform, or similarly, like this is the crosswalk. You'll see those at a lot of intersections. But I have heard, and I haven't really experienced this, but I've heard that there are places where those sorts of either truncated domes or maybe just something that's a little bit lower profile, more like the taped down string on a goalball court, is used to just indicate a path, like on a hiking path or something, where if it curves to the left or the path is veering off, you can follow this sort of tactile marking with your foot to indicate, which way the path is going. And I think there could definitely be more use of that outside of goalball in just the built environment. The other thing that, talking about following sound cues, I have just noticed, and I don't know if this was probably after I got into playing goalball. And so I had gotten in the habit of, tracing moving sound, is that if I'm in an airport, let's say, or somewhere where I'm not familiar, I haven't been there before, and so I may not know the route already, I don't have to be holding on to somebody. And sometimes, especially right now when people are trying to keep social distance, it's better if you can follow someone without holding on to them. And sometimes if that person has like keys in their pocket that are jingling, or sort of scuffier shoes, not rubber soled shoes, but shoes that make more sound as they're walking, I can just follow their footsteps or the noise that they're making and kind of track that sound the same way you would track the ball in a goalball game. So I think that's another kind of handy strategy that I've picked up, and that I think there are probably more ways that could be used, like deliberately, to make, other aspects of life more accessible.
I was talking with a friend who's a blind parent, and she wants her child to be able to play freely on the playground without her being like hovering helicopter mom. And so she tied a bell to her kid's shoe so she could track. So yeah, I mean, I think and it's also, especially now when we live in kind of this post-pandemic world where it's not as sort of safe or acceptable to get really close and touch someone, using sound as a tracker can be really important when you need to keep distance from someone, but you still need them to guide you.
Yeah, need to know where they are. Yeah, kids is a great example. There's actually a goalball player who Justin and I both know that had, still has a kid, but he's older now, but had like a toddler, and we would actually hear the toddler running around with his like squeaky shoes at goalball tournaments. So,
oh, right.
Case in point.
Yeah, it helps. It's amazing. I think oftentimes in the sort of sighted world, I feel like people don't quite always remember the power of sound and how sound can be used effectively in all sorts of situations, and even by sighted people themselves. I think it can be beneficial. Like, say, for example, your eyes need to be somewhere else, but you want to hear whatever is going on elsewhere. You can kind of use both your senses at the same time. But yeah, I think it's really cool. And that's why I was saying, I feel like as you two were kind of painting the picture of what a goalball court is like, I was thinking to myself, this is a world I want to live in all the time. So, which I think is part of
and like different textures. I mean, this isn't so much the case in goalball, but it occurs to me that another way that things could be communicated is like smooth means like rough means this, and like bumps mean that, just that's kind of a code. And you could use tactile surfaces to communicate meaning the same way that you would use like color coded signs to communicate meaning. There's like a certain type of bumpiness, that means the trail curves to the right or whatever,
Yeah, I've used that, not so much that it was designed to communicate information, but I kind of figured it out. So, Karla, I know, and I think maybe you as well, Justin, I've spent a fair amount of time in Penn Station in New York City, and I would often figure out my way around because the texture of the floor underneath my feet would change depending on where I was in the station. I don't know if you ever picked up on this, but so that would help me signal, okay, now I'm in the area where the platforms are, the stairs to the platforms are, because the ground texture has changed. So that is very helpful information. I think there's so many ways that we can communicate that are either nonverbal or non-visual that often we don't think about, or people who don't rely on them think about on a regular basis.
I agree. There are all sorts of ways in which non-visual information can be used. And I know that there's a blind architect named Chris Downey, who I used to know when I lived out in the Bay Area. He designed some of the buildings and maybe some of the trails as well at a camp that's used for multiple, sessions, both for blind kids and blind adults. He used this area out in the wine country, kind of in the Napa Valley area in California, called Enchanted Hills Camp. And I know that he kind of designed the space with the blind users in mind. So I've always wanted to go back. This was after I had moved back east, so I haven't gotten to see the stuff that he built, but I'm interested to see kind of how those features were, texture and other things were kind of built in to the space there, because I imagine all sorts of cool things that you could do if you thought about it more intentionally.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good testament to why it's important for people who experience the world in different ways to be in those professions like architecture or engineering, because they're thinking about design elements that probably someone who doesn't have that experience wouldn't think of otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. My other Berkeley experience or Bay Area experience like that is there's a building called the Ed Roberts campus. It's right across the street from the Ashby BART station. And it was named after Ed Roberts, who's a champion of the disability rights movement and independent living movement. And most of the organizations that have their offices there are disability, organizations that are made up of and advocate for people with disabilities. There's all sorts of interesting design features in that building, but one that was very striking to me is that there are no stairs in the building, but there's a central ramp that gets you from the first to the second floor, and it spirals around, and it's just kind of like this design, like focal point of the building. As when you walk in, there's like this big sweeping ramp that you take to get where you're going in the building, and just really kind of, I don't know, makes a statement and is also functional at the same time.
And sounds cool looking too.
Yeah, it's very neat. It's very, it's very like modern. Yeah, it's like a early 21st century building. I think it went up when I was living out there, probably around like 2009, 2010. So definitely had this kind of sleek modern design.
That's really cool. So taking it back to goalball for a second, we had a nice, awesome detour into architecture, which I think is so interesting and has so many parallels with the way that goalball was designed originally. Could you guys talk a little bit about how, I know a little bit of the story of how you two connected, and I'd love to learn more about how you started the goalball league here in DC and how that transformed into other things, including the Metro Washington Association of Blind Athletes.
Sure, I can start. So I actually moved back to DC from the Bay Area in 2011. And for the first few years that I was here, I had thought about wanting to continue playing goalball, and actually did continue. I actually would go up to Philadelphia where there was a goalball program. So about a 2-hour Amtrak trip to go up to Philly to play with the goalball team up there, which shows how addicted I had gotten to the sport and I wanted to keep playing. I didn't have the same community of being able to sort of play every week and hang out afterward that I had gotten used to when I was out west, and also just felt that there are so many blind people in the DC area. There should be a program in DC, and there should be that opportunity for lots of people to get involved and experience the sport. So I was kind of poking around and trying to figure out if anyone wanted to partner with me on developing a program. And then luckily, Justin moved into the area. Where were you coming from, Justin? Alabama?
I was actually coming from Alabama in 2014. I was kind of on the same search, poking around, seeing how I could play goalball again and get involved. And I was really surprised that there were no existing programs in DC, given that the volume of blind people we have in this area. I went to good old Facebook and asked one of the forums, hey, how do I find people to play goalball with, or what's the closest thing to Washington, DC? And someone mentioned get a hold of Karla. So that's pretty much how we got to know each other. I reached out to her. We met up and started talking about plans to get goalball started here. For a while, I also went to Philadelphia with Karla and practiced with guys there.
We found a venue finally that was willing to host a clinic. So it was, right. We didn't have like a standing practice there, but it was a one-time clinic. It was at Trinity University in Brookland, the Brookland area of Northeast DC. And we put the word out on a bunch of, listservs of like the local blindness groups and put it out on Facebook.
We had about 40 people come out on our clinic day.
And that really showed, us how much demand or, desire and appetite there was, in the community for this kind of a program. Eventually that year formed what's now called the Metro Washington Association of Blind Athletes. or MWABA, affectionately. And our website is gomwaba.org. Goalball was really the first like standing program that we had through MWABA. We eventually got more permanent gym space. For a while we were at the Jewish Community Center over in DuPont. And then a couple years after that, we wound up with a space through Department of Parks and Rec in DC at the Columbia Heights Rec Center. And that became kind of our goalball home for the last few years. Then kind of expanded from there into some other things, like we had yoga classes a couple of times a month. A lot of our members were doing judo, a couple of different dojos around the area. And then, as you mentioned, Qudsiya, 3 years ago, we started the tandem cycling program. And we have tandem bike lockers around DC. So altogether, I think we've got about 8 or 9 tandem bikes that either we bought or many people generously donated to us. And so through having those bikes, we're able to organize rides for either group rides, or during the pandemic, it's been more individual rides with just, one blind person with a sighted captain getting out and biking around the area.
That's really cool. So for that first goalball clinic, so you mentioned 40 or 50 people showed up. So were those 40 and 50 people, all of them sort of seasoned goalball players who were looking for a team, or did you also get people who had barely heard of it or just showed up out of curiosity?
Yeah, we definitely got all sorts of different folks, people who have never played sports before in their lives, people who are recently lost their vision or were losing their vision, and people of different ages too. We had kids that were 14, 15. We also had adults that were, I don't know, upwards of 50 plus, or middle-aged folks. It was kind of all across the board, which was nice, because then we broke those people up into groups, and they got to work together and kind of had like a little mini tournament after we taught them the basics and the foundations of the game.
Yeah, I think that's really neat. And for the two of you who you have been involved in sports, adaptive sports, since young childhood or early adulthood, but for someone like myself, I lost vision, a dramatic amount of vision kind of later in life. In my teenage years, I was, doing non-adaptive sports, I guess, in a sense, trying to adjust to whatever the mainstream sporting communities I was in. So I played field hockey briefly, I ran track, and it never occurred to me to have a running guide or to ride a tandem bike. When I couldn't ride a single bike anymore, I thought to myself, okay, I guess I'm done with cycling for the rest of my life because I can't do it solo. So I think sports have really incredible power to show you what you are still capable of, particularly for someone who has lost the ability to do something over time, whether that's walking or seeing or hearing or what have you. So I think that's why I was curious about it, and so fascinated that so many people who were sort of newly had lost their vision or had no experience with sports showed up. And I'm curious if you've followed any of those people over time and what you've seen in terms of their development, or how the act of participating in these sporting activities has impacted other aspects of their lives.
Some of our members who came out to that first event, not everyone who came out to that first event stayed involved and became big goalball players, but some of them did, and became a big part of their lives. I've heard from folks of all ages that, especially if you're losing your vision and you're just seeing all the things that you can't do anymore, like, oh, I can't do that. It can be very depressing and difficult adjustment. And so having goalball, and not only the sport itself, but also the community of people, and kind of being introduced to the community of other blind people who are of all ages and doing all sorts of different things with their lives, kind of have already made that adjustment that you might be in an earlier stage of going through, that was a really important community to become a part of, just to sort of see a little bit of that future of like, oh, I can see myself fitting into this and having these new possibilities open up to me. It's not just doors that are closing, it's also doors that are opening. And that's actually been one of the coolest things for me about starting MWABA, is like having those conversations with people and seeing that we've like created made a place available for people to get introduced to that and to become part of, a new community and get introduced to some new sports and new things that they can do.
Yeah, another big thing that I've heard from some of our members is it's been definitely a big confidence builder. It's given them the sense that, like any other athlete, if they work hard at something, they can get better at it, they can become competitive, and that there are opportunities out there, regardless of whether or not they're blind or losing their vision or what have you.
Yeah, and I think the competitiveness is not for everybody, obviously. Some people just want to, hang out with their friends and have fun. And the nice thing about goalball is that opportunity is there. But I think for some folks who are maybe more like Justin said, he's super competitive. I think seeing that the sport is played at an elite level for people who may have, whether they were blind their whole lives or not, I think one of the things that people are sometimes surprised by when they see goalball played at a high level is like, oh, like, this is hard. Like, that ball's moving fast. You have to, like, people kind of think like, oh, because it's blind people, it's just kind of this cute thing that you do. And it's maybe not as strenuous. So I think sometimes when people realize that there are higher levels you can aspire to compete at, and that then the expectations are there that blind people can compete at that high level, that's really exciting to folks who want that, and to know that like people have higher expectations of us. And that can kind of contradict some more negative stereotypes or assumptions that are out there in society, that there's kind of a limit to what you can accomplish in general or specifically in terms of physical activity as a person with a disability.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think it's great to know. It feels less like this is a second-class citizen sport, because, that's not true. It's played at a Paralympic, the highest level of athleticism that you could be at. And it's competitive and fierce and hard, frankly, as someone who has tried it themselves and found it really, really challenging. Going back to your point about Justin's point earlier, just about pushing yourself. I certainly felt that way when I first started tandem. I remember talking about it with you, Karla, that day over drinks and thinking, oh, there's no way I can ride a bike. I hadn't been on a bike in 15 years, and that had been a single bike, and I couldn't even fathom the thought. And, I got on the bike and turned out it was like riding a bike, and I really enjoyed it. And I remember feeling so accomplished that first day when we rode, like, what was it, like 8 miles or something? It was so great, and went on to do many, many miles of riding, some of it with you. And it's important to kind of confront your fears, and you don't realize what you're capable of until you actually push yourself to do it. So I think there's a lot of value in that as well, as Justin was saying. So what are your favorite, for each of you, what are your favorite aspects of goalball? What do you like? That you've said so many things about it, but I'm curious about what's your favorite aspect of either the game or the experience of the process?
So for me, my favorite parts of goalball is, again, the competitiveness, also just the camaraderie that you build with your teammates and even other people in the league, and then also just getting to know new people, seeing new places, because since goalball is played nationally and it's not like a mainstream sport, you sometimes have to travel to different parts of the country to play it against other people. Those are the different types of things. It allows you to, it's allowed me over my years of playing to become more independent and experience things that I may or may not have experienced just staying in my hometown.
How about you, Karla?
There are dynamics of being in a team, like the camaraderie just with friends is part of it, but just within the game itself, the dynamics of figuring out how your team works well and what each player needs to succeed, and how to help, maximize each person's potential. I guess kind of partially as a player, partially as a coach, which as I've gotten older, I've transitioned into being more of a coach. I really enjoy that. And I think it has definite applications outside of the sport, just to being a good sort of player in other sorts of teams professionally. And so I really enjoyed that aspect. And I feel like I've grown a lot from doing it over the last few years.
Yeah, I remember you telling me once that organizing a goalball tournament was a really helpful exercise because you use some of the things you learned from that process and organizing other types of events and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's project management, man. Like, we've run a tournament in DC, I think 3 years now, and figuring out like the venue and the hotel and the food and
how much do we charge people, things like that. So
we are athlete led more so than many groups that put on goalball tournaments have been around a lot longer than we have. And so I think it's neat that we can kind of do the organizing of it as well. And not that we're doing it, we have volunteers who help out in all sorts of ways, but that it's really led by, me and Justin and other people on our board who are mostly, goalball athletes themselves. And I think that's kind of a cool, nothing about us without us kind of a thing that we're able to show the community that we can not just play the sport, but also do all the behind the scenes stuff too.
To piggyback off of what Karla just said, it's also given us the opportunity to kind of get the community involved and kind of educate them on what blind people can do. We partnered with different sororities in the area, different programs like the master's program in physiology at Georgetown. So we regularly get volunteers from these different organizations, and a lot of them have never met a blind person or interacted with a blind person. And then, this gives them an opportunity to grow individually and also experience different things, or a different kind of sport, or a different way of looking at a competition or what have you.
Yeah, I've definitely worked with, other sighted athletes, both in the context of running and cycling. And I think it's really a two-way street in terms of education. And then the community grows and there's more opportunity for partnership. And, so I totally resonate with what you're saying, Justin, about being open and having these volunteers come in and know nothing about blindness or the blind experience and being educated and also having fun and making new friends. I think there's a lot of value to that.
I would say the most interesting volunteer we've ever had was a random Uber driver who was driving one of our volunteers to practice. And he decided to stay and check it out. And then he continued to come back.
I forgot about him.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, it just shows how much of an impact you can have on any given person at any given point in time.
Yeah, and it also comes with the opportunity for blind people to be out there in the world and do things. If that goalball athlete wasn't traveling to that goalball practice, that Uber driver would never have had that experience. So yeah, I mean, I think there's an inherent value to disabled people of all sorts being out in the world and contributing in the same way as anybody else, really.
I feel like I'm a goalball ambassador especially whenever I'm going to a goalball tournament and I'm at an airport or I'm at, on the train and someone asks me what it is, I'm always telling people, go to YouTube, check it out. It is really a fun sport and a lot of people don't know about it. And then when they do, I actually had somebody who I met on the Amtrak train. We were going to the tournament outside Philadelphia. And she said, "Oh, I live near there. I'm going to check it out." And then in the middle of the tournament, I come out the court from playing a game and I, walked into the hallway and this one was like, "Hey, I was a person on your train. I came and checked it out."
Oh man, that's so great. Those sorts of things happen in the most unexpected places. So I wanted to close by asking you guys if you could share, what advice would you have for a blind person or someone with another type of disability who wants to, get into sports or goalball in particular, or just sports in general?
I would say that the best advice I could give a person just looking to get involved in anything, sports or learning new things in general, is just don't be afraid to ask. Even though there's no ready resource currently, there's always someone who's willing to help and possibly even have the same interests as you. It's always good to ask, and the worst thing that can happen is you start a whole new organization and get a bunch of people together.
The internet is definitely a tool. Google around, see if something exists in your community already. And if it doesn't, then find a friend, see if you can put something together. A resource, if, there are several nationwide organizations like Disabled Sports USA, and they run different camps. Sometimes there are scholarships to attend the camp if, finances are a barrier. For blind athletes, the United States Association of Blind Athletes, USABA, is another clearinghouse. They'll have a list of some of the local groups like ours around the country that you can get plugged into. And this is, sounds cheesy, but it might be scary at first to try something you've never done before. But I have never regretted anything that I did that I was initially afraid to do. The only regrets that I have are things where I had an opportunity and I didn't do it. And then I'm like, man, I wish I had tried that. So be willing to step outside of your comfort zone and maybe try something that sounds hard or that sounds weird or that you just don't know what it's going to feel like, because you might turn out to love it. Like I turned out to love goalball when I tried it for the first time as a 25-year-old.
Yeah, that's great. I think those are all really, really helpful pieces of advice and things that I have had to talk myself into many a time myself. So I'm sure many people who are listening can relate to that. And we'll share the links to those organizations in the show notes, as well as to gomwaba.org, so that folks who are in the DC area can check out our activities and get plugged in. We're on a little bit of a hiatus right now with the pandemic and trying to see how we can do things safely, but hopefully soon we'll all be back on the goalball court and on the tandem bikes and back in our community doing things together. But so I just want to thank you both so much for joining me on the podcast, and this has been such a fun conversation, and I personally learned a lot about goalball that I didn't know before, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was great talking with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to episode 4 of Down to the Struts. On Thursday, people across the United States will celebrate Thanksgiving. I wanted to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for listening, subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing Down to the Struts. I hope this podcast is an opportunity to create community, learn about our differences, and uncover the unexpected commonalities that bring us together as human beings, despite the things that may seem to divide us. This podcast would also not be possible without the energy and creativity of Anna Wu, Adrian Kong, Ilana Nevins, Avery Anapol, and Claire Shanley. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for episode 5, coming to your feeds on December 8th, so we can get back down to it.